Chapter 3 Raiders. Nothing personal, just you and me. The town of New Appaloosa was now barely larger than a small clump of buildings behind me, the dirt beneath my hooves having been replaced by the cracked and aged concrete of the old highway. I had to give the wagon a good tug to get it up onto the concrete. 200 years of neglect and the occasional grenade hadn't made it the smoothest of surfaces to traverse, but still, it was the most direct route to travel, and usually a safe one. Usually. Before continuing further, I made sure to double check that my gun was still in its holster, loaded and ready to go at the first sign of trouble. Of course, it was. I'd like to think I wasn't dumb enough or so absent-minded enough to leave it at Ditsy's shop, but it never hurt to check. Radiation never was good for the brain cells. Glancing back at the town, I could see the sentry still eyeing me from all the distance away, the glint of light on the glass showing at least one sniper position. I got the message. They didn't want me hanging around pointlessly as raider bait, and I really couldn't have agreed more. Turning away from a pile of wrecked train cars, calling itself a town, I began to trot forwards on the asphalt while being sure that the wagon didn't get caught in the many potholes running the length of the road. I'd honestly have preferred traveling without the cumbersome thing, but what else was I going to use to carry all that scrap? The marker in my vision was pointing me in the general direction of Manhattan, though the road itself had other ideas. Just a scant 10-minute walk after I lost sight of New Appaloosa, I came across the intersection in the road. The trail snaked off in two separate directions ahead of me, neither of them a direct route to the big city. A sorry-looking road sign sat just off the road, bent and in danger of vanishing into the dirt completely. I just latched onto it with my magic and bent it up enough to make out the barely legible letters. Appaloosa, Dodge City, Ponyville. Appaloosa, the original, was back the way I came. Nothing but a den of asshole slavers working for Red Eye up Philadelphia's way. Dodge City was largely abandoned. Just a few squatters trying to fend off the odd bloat sprite or feral ghoul looking for a light snack. At least until the slavers came to pick up the poor sods and put them to work. It was not somewhere where I was in the habit of wandering. The final direction, steadily heading north in the conjuncture with a nearby railway line, would bring me straight into Ponyville. Raider activity was common in the area, and yet it was the way I had to go if I wanted to reach the highway to Manhattan. I probably had to avoid the town as much as possible, unless I suddenly had a life goal of becoming a grotesque wall decoration. I dropped the rusted sign, letting it sag back down into the dirt, and selected the road to Ponyville. The road was long, but not one I hadn't traveled before. Most merchants and scavengers had to, it being the most direct route between the settlements. And so I walked, the vast cloud cover above me being ever present. The only sound being the howling of the wind, the clopping of my hooves, and the creaks and groans of my wagon. The sight of the old burnt-out trees began to dot the side of the roads. Lands where green had once been the dominant color. Now it was brown as everything else, or black, where the balefire bombs had left but shadows in their wake. Goddesses, I hated this journey. And yet it was one I made many times. Never able to stay in one town for too long. Always more scrap to dig up and caps to make. Though I will admit I was half tempted to stop off in the Republic, spend a night in the warm, only slightly rotted bed. Wouldn't that have been nice? But then again, I was making good time. No, it was better just to move on and find somewhere safe to camp out for the night, preferably somewhere well past raider territory. The burnt oaks were soon joined by hulking skeletons of old buildings, nothing left but the beams that once supported them. One still had several vehicles in the parking lot, their owners having left clawing at the doors, even 200 years later. A few skeletons were inside one of the larger wagons, scores of ponies laying dead and forgotten in their seats. I spared them but a small glance as I walked on by, leaving the damned souls to their rest. There was a crashed sky wagon laying on its side in the middle of the road ahead, probably having been blown out of the sky when Cloudsdale got bombed a little south of here. The Pegasus who had guided it laid broken in the harness, though the lack of further bodies may have indicated that some of the passengers had crawled away from the crash. I couldn't see them as having gotten far. The Skywagon too had been picked over long before I was even a concept. I checked it during a journey long past, probably my second or third. It really doesn't matter. It was just something to guide my wagon around. The number of buildings thinned out, though the dead trees remained as a constant throughout. Up ahead, I could see a bridge spanning over the lengthy, ghastly gorge, and right on the edge of the giant scar in the ground was a small building with a few rusted skywagons parked forever beside it. Huh. I just realized that I'd never actually had a look inside of that place before, always crossing the bridge over without much of a glance towards the structure. I stopped for a moment looking between it and the bridge. Crossing the gorge like that was probably filled with enough monsters to melt my face. It wasn't even funny. Nah, what the hey? I adjusted course, trotting straight up to the building as my EFS pinged in response. Red rocket wagon stop. I unstrapped myself from the wagon's harness and left it on the side of the road. The sky wagons that I'd spotted earlier were hooked up to the long, dead machinery, probably meant to recharge the spark batteries inside the hulking pieces of junk. I had a quick look inside of the wagons, much to my disappointment finding them empty skeletons, or anything lootable. Clearly, some pony had already gone through these. Not surprising, really. Places like this, or anywhere else really, where I might have found something to scavenge were slowly dying out. The only place that seemed to have a never-ending supply of salvage was Huffington, and I'd really have to be at rock bottom before I set a single hoof in that death trap. I'd known a few fellow scavengers who'd gone off the hoof seeking their fortunes. I'd never seen any of them again. Well, maybe they just never had a reason to come back. But given that this was the Equestrian wasteland, I wasn't going to get my hopes up. Still, these skywagons had eternal components that I could retrieve and sell at a future date, so I made a mental note to myself to come back later and do just that. Oh, was that a Sparkle Cola machine I just saw? Indeed it was, sitting all alone just next to the door leading into the building itself. And I mean, who would say no to a free Sparkle Cola? Forget the skywagons, I really needed one of those. I eagerly trotted up the still flickering machine and gave it a good looking over. It still had power, somehow, after these last 200 years. Actually, I'm pretty sure I've never seen one unpowered without having been battered with a lot of bullets before hoof. They really built these things to last. And I didn't have any bits. I grumbled to myself, only caps lining my pockets, and the machine certainly wouldn't accept those, no matter how much I tried. Well, only one thing for it. The machine gave a resounding clank as I reared up on my forehooves and bucked it as hard as I could. Ouch, 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 ouch. Okay, not my brightest idea ever. And now I had an aching fetlock or two. Great. I turned to face the machine, a little miffed I may not get its goods. I suppose I could try shooting it, but why waste the bullets on something so, well, stupid? But unless I could find a crowbar and the strength to use it in the next 5 minutes or so, I was probably going to have to give up on tasting the carroty goodness. And of course, then I spotted a couple of bits hanging out of a pile of trash a short distance away. Yeah, that was good too. I inserted the gold coins, watching as the machine deposited its last few colas into my waiting hooves. I popped one open immediately, sticking the cap with the rest while depositing the other drinks into my bags to be sorted out by my pit bug. Sipping on the delightful Sparkle Cola, I trotted over the doors and made my way inside the red rocket. The windows had been all blown out long ago, and the few remaining items within had mostly knocked off the shelves and onto the floor. There were a couple of preserved boxes of dandy colt apples that I scooped into my saddlebags, 1 or 2 snack cakes, and a breached container with some mush inside that probably once was some kind of fruit. That last one I simply tossed to the side and promptly forgot about. The cash register was empty. Figures. And the only other objects inside the room were some bent old cans and burnt magazines. Nothing of use. Oh, and there was that little red bar that I just noticed in my vision. Following the EFS led me to the door leading to what appeared to be a storeroom, the red bar sitting idly and only the occasional twitch of movement. I brought out my little 9mm pistol and readied it in my magic. For a few tense moments, I just stood at the door, my breaths quiet as I could make them as I slowly brought the hoof up to the handle. And then I threw it open, weapon moving to train on the offending hostile. The Radroad flinched back in the sunlight entering the storeroom, making some aggressive clicks in my general direction. Seriously, did I just get so worked up over a stupid roach? This EFS really needed some better identification then, red bar, green bar. I walked up to the radroach, bringing up my right foot hoof and stomping it down on the creature. It gave a final screech as it was crushed beneath me, the red bar blinking out. Now I just had to do the same to the other red bars that suddenly appeared in its place. Wait, what? Pain coursed through my shoulder as it was nicked by a speeding bullet, the firing of a gun accompanied by my startled and pained shout. I dropped to the floor and span as another bullet flew over my head, my eyes locking into a manic-looking blue unicorn mare covered head to hoof in gore. She wore scraps of whatever she could as armor, her eyes bloodshot and twitching as she looked at me in what I really hoped was actual hunger. "There you are," she shouted in an almost sing-song voice. Time froze as she brought her guns to face me, percentages appearing all over her body. I hadn't actually meant to do that, but fuck it, I've had worse accidents. I targeted her barely armored chest, and once I released the spell, I brought the gun around almost on autopilot as I started the fire. Bullets dug deep into the mare's hide as she crumpled into a pile, twitching as the last life ebbed away from her body. Uh-oh, we got ourselves a fighter. A male voice laughed as bullets peppered the outside of the red rocket, and then a glass bottle with a flaming rag that got pelted through the window and into the storeroom. Oh boy. The immense hit licked off my back as the Molotov exploded further in the storeroom. The flames quickly began to consume everything it could, and I could definitely feel it singeing my tail. I scrambled out of the storeroom in a mad rush, jumping down below the bullets and up against the wall under the window. Fire behind me, raiders in front of me. Fucking welcome to Equestria. I took a moment to look at my EFS, and all the bars now swarming around it. There were at least 7 raiders outside, and each one was looking to make me their latest victim. Now, if I had a couple of friends with me, this might have been no problem, or maybe if I was a Steel Ranger. But I was alone, and I most certainly was not a Steel Ranger. Well, crap. A stream of bullets above me ceased as the raiders firing them reloaded their weapons, and I took the opportunity to take a quick look. The other 7 looked just as deranged and full of dash as the first, 3 carrying barely functional machine guns while the rest all pelted me with 10mm pistols. Damn it, they must have come from the other side of the bridge while I was looking around. A raiding party from Ponyville, perhaps? Or... A bullet striking a meter from my face made me decide that I really didn't care where they came from, and I levitated my own pistol up to the window and fired blindly in the general direction of one of the raiders I had seen. I emptied the clip and was rewarded with a strange scream from one of the mares. A quick glance over showed my last bullet had been fortunate enough to strike the mare in the throat, throwing her to the floor where she began to bleed out. They apparently were out of healing potions, so that was lucky for me. "Okay, now you're getting it," one of the stallions shouted as he charged for my window. Okay, maybe lucky was too strong of a word. My magic fumbled to retrieve a clip for my pistol, barely getting into the slot before the raider jumped through the window and down on top of me. I let off a single shot that went wide and was rewarded with a hoof to the face, and my weapon falling from my grasp, somewhere amongst the shelves. The raider gave me a blood-curdling laugh, and I immediately entered Sats as he leveled his 10mm pistol at my head. So this was going really well. Next time I saw Ditzy, I would make sure to give the bubbly ghoul a massive thank you kiss for the pit bug. This spell was really giving me time to think about my impending doom. The raider had pinned me beneath him, and I doubted I could shove him off before he gave my brain some air holes. Same would happen if I tried to reach for my weapon, which I could see in my peripheral vision was discarded to my right. I had 0 in the way of combat spells, and I'd probably die before I could stick my horn in his eyes, nor just die doing it. But at least I'd leave him something for me to remember by. Oh goodness, I didn't want to die here. I hated the wasteland. I hated scavenging old ruins in the hopes of making enough to eat that week. I even hated my own name. But one thing I loved? Breathing. Oh, hello there. Sats really does give you time to think things through, doesn't it? I could in no way act against the psychopath before he blew my head off. But do you know the one thing I could do? Switch the safety on. My spell collapsed and the stallion above me pulling the trigger to an extremely satisfying click, my magic still sparkling over the pistol's safety. The raider's momentary confusion allowed me to kick him off my body before jumping for my own gun. The raider, not yet done with me, dropped his gun cluelessly and brought out a really big knife from his barding. A really big knife that was now heading in my direction. I rolled to one side as the stallion lunged for me, his knife scraping my barding as it quickly got up to my hooves. Oh yeah, and there were 5 others outside still shooting at me. A bullet hit me in the left shoulder, and oh Celestia, the pain was unbearable. My barding had just morphed around the bullet, stopping it from going clean through, by certainly creating a sizable diver in my shoulder. My face met the floor as I fell, my immediate problem getting to his own hooves while the knife held in his mouth. My pitbuck was flashing with warnings regarding my left foreleg, though the pain I spotted a 9mm still lying behind the stallion. My horn lit up and my gun swiveled around as the raider made to finish me off, only to howl as a bullet lodged into his posterior, something I followed up with a second to make him drop to the floor, before I painted the shells with the gray matter. 3 down, 5 to go. I brought out a healing potion from my saddlebags, gulping the ding down and watching as my shoulder stitched itself back together. The dented barding popped back into place on my shoulder, the bullet falling out and clattering to the floor. Okay, I could do this. Just keep my head down and shoot. Easy.
Fuck it, charge him!
One of the raiders shouted from outside.
I get his head from my room.
Oh, well, there goes that idea. I got back to my hooves, gun at the ready and prepared to jump at his sats, in a desperate bid to hit as many as I could before they reached the building. Only for 2 of the 5 to go down in a hail of bullets. Bullets that came from the sky. The other 3 jolted around to face the oncoming Pegasus as he dived away in order to make another pass. One of them raised the rifle towards the flying pony, and I fired several bullets in their direction. One made contact with the raider's leg and she fell to her knees with a hiss of pain.
Stupid little unicorn!
The injured raider shouted out, grabbing a bottle from her bag. Oh, so that's where the Molotov had come from. Before she could burn me out, however, a bullet pierced right through her heart and sent the makeshift bomb flying backwards in the opposite direction, exploding away from any pony. One of the raiders turned to face their assailant as the Pegasus came to the landing, the other screaming in terror as he decided it was a good idea to run to the red rocket for cover. It only took him a single bullet for me to bring him down. This left one single raider facing off against the Pegasus, though several shots from the latter's battle saddle quickly made several new holes in the former, as the raider went down like a wet gore bag. And this just left me with the Pegasus on the bar. The EFS was green, though I didn't know that this guy was a friend. Ugh, these varmints don't even have good loot to get. Calamity groaned as he examined one of the dropped machine guns, chucking the now useless thing to one side. Not a single item on them is worth a thing. Shame. The brown Pegasus wearing the battle saddle and black Stetson was Calamity. He had branded image on his flank that signaled him as a Dashite, some pony who had abandoned the Enclave in favor of actually doing something with their lives. He was a regular sight of any pony traveling in the area around New Appaloosa, where he spent his days guarding traveling ponies and otherwise against raiders, slavers, and anything else that might want to start a fight. And now he was looking directly at me as I stepped out of Red Rocket. "Y'all all right over there?" he shouted over to me. "They had you pinned good." "Fine, I'm fine," I called back, trotting up to the stallion. "Calamity, right? Thanks for giving me help back there." He adjusted his hat. "Ain't nothing to it. It's my policy to stamp out ponies like those. You from a stable?" He noted he was eyeing my pit buck, but just shook my head. "Nope. Got it from Ditzy back in town." "Ah, I see," he replied, turning to look outwards towards the bridge. "You heading in that direction?" "Yeah, scavenger. There's a job I need to do over there." "Scav, huh?" he said almost sheepishly, looking over my shoulder at something. "Well, sorry about your wagon then." "What?" I turned around. Oh, Celestia, damn it, all the way to Luna's Moon and back again. My wagon was in flames, and with a loud pop of some wood gave way and one of the wheels began to roll by the road itself before clattering down onto its side. "My bad," Calamity apologized. "I've been the one to kill the mare with the Molotov." "Yeah," I replied with gritted teeth. Calamity coughed into his hoof. "Anyhow, I'd advise against heading Ponyville way. Raiders are really agitated as of late, as you can see." I just sighed. "Wagon or no, I've got to get to Manhattan, and that means continuing on that way." "Well, if you say so, just be careful. Me and my battle saddle may not be around next time," he warned. "I'll keep that in mind, but I'll be fine." "Well, alright then. Take care now." He ended off unfurling his wings and taking to the skies once again. I watched him go, the Pegasus likely going to guard some caravan or another, before turning my eyes back to my poor old wagon. In less than a day, I'd been shot, used as a couple clips worth of ammo, a healing potion, and lost my wagon, and I gained nothing in return. Well, at least I got to keep breathing after all. Turning from the increasingly on fire red rocket, I began to trot towards the bridge spanning the ghastly gorge. Seriously, Stable 84 had better be worth it. Footnote: Level 2. New perk: Rapid Reload. All of your weapon reloads are 25% faster than normal. There we go. Only on Chapter 3 and things are already getting hectic. Our poor Colt here hopefully will make it to the vault. Anyways, those who I do know make it to the vault because they are much too generous are my wonderful donators. Thank you Chase LeMaster, HKH4 aka Texture, Triss, the Animated Ghost, Solus, and of course a large thank you to Silent Titan. You guys are amazing and I appreciate it so much. If you want other ways to support my channel, well, your viewership is more than enough, but a comment and like also go far along in the algorithm, and I appreciate it a ton. Anyways, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.